Hi, team.
Hello, Mike.
Hi.
Hi. So we have another guest with us this evening, which is fantastic. How is everyone this evening?
Yeah, pretty good. It doesn't feel like evening. We're getting a bit more light. It's not as depressing as when we started at these, and it was dark at 5. So noticing that, which is nice.
Yeah, it's actually you can see outside now, which is a pleasant change. Does make all the difference. How are you, Tess?
Yeah, very well, thanks. Cracking on with training. I managed to do some running this week, so that's a positive. So we're going in the right direction, at least. So very happy.
Oh, great stuff. And welcome, Hatty. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So, Hatty, who are you, and why have we dragged you on here tonight?
My name's Hatty. I am a performance nutritionist. So I guess sort of like a bit of my background is I'm based at Loughborough Sport 4 days a week, so supporting the student athletes there. I've done the last sort of like 4.5 years with the men and women's hockey squads, which has been great, like really exciting journey. Great athletes, great coaches and support staff over there. And then my other 1 day a week is with the English Institute of Sport, and I consult with British Rowing through them. So yeah, a really good mix.
Nice. That's really cool. And I love the fact you've got the different sports as well. That must be really nice.
Yeah, it definitely like keeps it interesting, and like every day is just so different. And I guess also, like from my perspective, you know, working with those athletes who are students who compete at Bucks all the way up to like the Olympic and international kind of level. So yeah, it's really exciting.
Oh, that's awesome.
How do you deal with the first years?
Oh yeah, it's definitely a good challenge. Yeah, that mix of them, I guess, in a non-COVID world, coming in first year, like not really knowing what they're doing, wanting to go out partying, kind of like balancing that with terms of like if, say, for example, like hockey in the Prem team, like balancing that, training with them, academic commitments, that sort of thing. But yeah, it's fun, really fun.
It's funny because I remember my first year, and I think I think most people realize that first year you're gonna have a slightly different schedule to see.
Yeah.
So that I remember after my first term going back home, and my mum was like, "What have you been doing?" I was like, "I've been playing hockey like 6 times a week. I don't understand." And she's like, "It's just first year."
Oh yeah, absolutely. Just to think in terms of like catered halls, like your classic fry up breakfast, you know, massive portion sizes. It is absolutely great. But yeah, it's when you kind of fall into that like performance athlete bracket as well, it's balancing the two can be quite tricky. But what's first year of uni for, really? So
yeah.
Got to get out there and enjoy yourself.
Most definitely.
So Hats, like, it's really good to get you on. Obviously, I know you quite a bit from before, and sort of said to Mike, this would be a really cool specialist to get on. So we've done some sports psych stuff. We've had Brett on talking about more hockey stuff last week. We've talked about coaching stuff. We figured your discipline would be like a really useful thing for the 101 audience. So a lot of younger club players, aspiring club players, want to go and probably imagine some of the people that come through, like where Tesco's gone to Durham or come to Loughborough, just the phase before that aspiring to get to one of those programs. So going to put a couple of scenarios your way and talk about what you think like really good practice for an athlete would be in these situations. So finish school, home at 4:30, 5 o'clock, whatever, got to be out the door at 6:30 for training that starts at 7. What's good practice for that window? And then the during training, and then the recovery bit for that, say, training night.
Cool. So I think with that, if you've got a really quick turnaround from sort of when you get back from school, like to training, sort of like main thing you're focusing on is just some really like quick and simple sort of like carbohydrate based snacks. So for example, if you had time, something like toast with like peanut butter and jam on, like a small bowl of cereal. If you're literally like grabbing something and just leaving, things like banana, I'm a massive fan of saurine or like a fruit bread, cereal bars. Yeah, so good. Rice cakes, those sort of things. Just something you can like grab and go, basically. So like during a training session, I guess sort of main thing to focus on is just staying on top of your hydration. Really important from a like a cognitive perspective. So making sure that you can like understand the drill, understand what the coach is saying, those sort of things. I guess if it's a really like long, intense session, you could bring like a little snack with you as well, maybe like a banana or something. But I guess from like my experience and kind of like being around training sessions, there's not always the time to take on snacks like that. And then recovery, again, for me, especially if you've got like a long journey home or something, making sure that you've got something with you in the car. So like really good option for that would be like a chocolate milk or something like that. So really good for rehydrating, source of carbohydrate and source of protein, really.
And then the post, when they get home, what's good protocols around like post training, even if it is quite late? Is it important to what's the right level of sort of for recovery, even if it is that offsetting of, oh, it's 10 o'clock, what should I do? Don't have something too heavy, still need to recover properly. It can be a tricky time with the late finish.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with that, even if you do get back and it is a late finish, like it's still really important to have something to really sort of like help you recover. Sort of like in my eyes, like worst thing that you could do is just get home and just go to sleep. It's just not going to support recovery at all. So I guess even if you could just have like a light meal, so let's think really simply like scrambled eggs on toast, baked beans on toast, something like that is better than nothing. Even if you could like a really quick like chicken stir fry or something like that. I guess sort of like a good habit to get into is kind of trying to think in advance. So can you like batch cook something in the week, which you can literally get home, take out of the fridge and then have it as soon as you get in. So minimum time cooking, but still get a good meal in and can get to bed at a reasonable time still.
This is throwing me back to my days when I used to go between school and training in the evenings, and I used to have those like ready meal pastas before training. So I would get home about 4:30, 5 o'clock, and then I would have one of those training at 7. And then when I come back, my mum would have made dinner, and so I've effectively had 2 dinners. But she was so supportive of me, making sure that was fueled for these sessions, because otherwise you burn out after such a long day.
Yeah, absolutely. And like from my perspective, if you can't go to a training session and kind of like give your all, then almost like what's the point? Like everyone wants to go and like train hard. So yeah, need to make sure you're fueling from that. And again, after like you go to train to get better, like adapt, and you need to recover well to support those adaptations.
Got a quick question from Ben O'Horan. Halftime jelly babies, good or bad? I guess halftime in a game or even like midway through a training, yes or no?
I'm a massive fan of a halftime jelly baby.
Yes.
I will be honest. So like I've worked with athletes in the past or gone to like game days, and they've brought like packet of sweets and they're trying to like hide it from me, and I'm like, why are you trying to hide it from me? Like have them here, I'll have a few as well. So yeah, I'm a massive fan of sweets at halftime.
Excellent, me too.
So we've covered training hats. Let's talk a little bit about game days and like certain pushbacks lend themselves to different strategies. So if you've got an 11-12 pushback, it'd be kind of the breakfast that you'd advocate, the high carb, reasonably high carb, good source of protein, like normal. But what happens if it's like a tricky in betweeny one, like a 2:30 or a 3? Is that an eat once or eat twice kind of strategy? And if there's a bit of travel there, what's your key things to think about there?
Yeah, so I guess pushback times can be a bit of a nightmare. and can kind of like just push your like normal eating behaviors around a bit. So if you go for an example of like a half two pushback, I would definitely do like an eat twice sort of situation, just really making sure that you're fueling well. That might mean like an earlier breakfast and then sort of like a brunch type meal. So even if you went for like a bowl of pasta or beans on toast or something like that, more around sort of like that 11:30 mark, just to like leave enough time for digestion too. You also mentioned travel, which is a classic for us girls at Loughborough, especially now being in the Premier League, playing like a lot of like the London-based clubs and stuff. So if we do have long travel, we normally promote kind of like taking plenty of snacks on the bus, maybe like a breakfast or something that they can put in the fridge overnight and like just take with them. So things like granola with like yogurt, overnight oats, like smoothies, those sort of things, just to kind of really help them fuel and hydrate before the game.
Is there a time frame pre-game where you should say, right, actually at this point stop eating big stuff, like, and actually give yourself that time to digest? What's the kind of time frame roughly?
So it's massively individualized. So we normally say like a pre-game meal, sort of like a 3 to 4 hour mark before pushback, and then another like pre-game snack like an hour before. But that is so individual. Like some people really can't eat close to sort of pushback or need like long to digest or that sort of thing. So what we kind of try and promote is kind of practicing like pre-game strategies like around a training session if possible, and just really kind of like experimenting with different types of food and different timings to kind of just work out what works best for them and like what they believe makes them play as best as they can.
Cool. So a couple of like questions, and then the are like either or.
Yeah.
Let's say why. You can say both as well, I suppose. Water or isotonics?
Say that again, sorry.
Water or isotonics for during a training session or game?
It depends. I know that's
fine.
very.
So it'd be good to know why it depends.
Yeah. So I would say any long or intense training session, like a carbohydrate based drink, is good. Anything sort of like lower level, less intense, water would be fine. But yeah, so it depends.
Is there a point that you can go too far on the isotonics and you don't need any more of the stuff that's in one, if that makes sense? And that's when you almost should be on the water, if that makes sense. Like, because I've played with guys before that'd be banging like three Lucozades a game. Like, we're not really watery. Like, that's not great.
Yeah, it's definitely not necessary. And I guess like the reason why we use the carb based drinks like is just for that extra energy. So if you feel like you are really reliant on them to get you through the game, like I would be questioning like what you would do, what you're eating before a game to make you feel like you need like 3 sports drinks to get you through. So yeah, and I would say like definitely nail that sort of like pre-game meal and snack before thinking about your Lucozade sports or whatever it might be.
So just had another question come in, which I think ties in really nicely. How do you feel for energy gels for teens? Like, you know, the example is son is 16, parents not convinced. Is there a better way? And I guess that comes back to what you were saying earlier. And if they're reliant on it, then what's their intake before?
Yeah, I think that's such a good question. And I think the whole sort of energy gels massively brings up sort of like a conversation around supplements and actually like at what level are they necessary in a test. I don't know what you think about this at all, but like my approach is supplements. So things like energy gels are definitely that extra like 1% like top end of your game, sort of like games. So yeah, I would say like in answer to this question, energy gels probably aren't necessary. So better things to be having are kind of like beforehand, like your bananas, your cereal bars, to really get that extra energy in. And then during like a game, things like going back to like the jelly babies or like a handful of sweets or something will do just as good as job as those gels.
I've heard you say before, Hattie, that you wouldn't necessarily advocate the supplement approach till you're getting all the big stuff right, the food stuffs. So
yeah,
just make sure you get that piece right as well.
Yeah, 100%. Like, just get the basics done really well before you start thinking about those extra 1% from supplements.
So again, on like the 101 audience, it's kind of getting to that athlete's age that come to the academies where they start going to the gym, and then they get exposed to that the culture around supplements in the gym. So what are like the do's and don'ts for a young athlete with like protein powder? And like that's probably the most popular one, isn't it? Whey protein. What are the kind of principles to work to?
Yeah, so whey protein is like massive. I think it's just so promoted through like social media and online platforms as well. It's almost seen as like this like golden ticket to make like strength gains and stuff like that. So I think first of all, I guess there's kind of like two stems to this. Whey protein isn't necessary. So like you could go to a gym session, finish, like have a pint of milk, glass of milk, Greek yogurt, another sort of snack which is high in protein, so things like beef jerky, those sort of things, which will do exactly the same as the whey protein. I think on top of that as well, supplements need to be like batch tested, and you really need to sort of think of like assess why you need it, like a supplement, assess the risk and assess the consequences if those supplements aren't batch tested or informed sport. And yeah, I would always take food first approach when possible.
So just to explain what informed sport is, Hats, to maybe a younger audience who've not been exposed to that yet.
Yeah, so informed sport is essentially making sure that any supplement or substance that you put in your body isn't contaminated. So if you took, let's say, any sort of supplement which was contaminated, it can lead to like a ban from your sport. So it's just making sure that everyone is competing on like a level playing field, basically. And like, yeah, what we're putting into our body isn't cheating or doping or anything like that, and it's good, basically. So, and I guess the biggest way to not put yourself at risk of doing that is just take a food first approach rather than supplements.
Yeah, and if people were going to check something, there is just straight on the website, aren't you, for the product and ingredients? Yeah,
all you need to do is put in your the product name, or there's a batch number on whatever product you take as well. And if it's not on the website, then don't take it.
What's the website? And I'll just put it in.
It's Informed Sport. I'm going to say it's .com, but it could be .co.uk.
So interesting, when we had Joe on, when we had Joe on a couple of weeks who did Antarctica, he swore by chocolate milk, and he was like, I need nothing. And, you know, in his training and everything else, he may as well have turned into a chocolate milk at one point. But like every run, every training session, every gym, like he was just smashing back pints of chocolate milk because he was like, I don't want to take protein. I don't see the point. It's not gonna make that difference. And obviously, when he was preparing for Antarctica, then it was just like, right, I need 6,000 calories a day to get myself ready. But yeah, just to highlight, like he did something incredible, and he was just chocolate milk. He didn't take protein or anything else. So
yeah,
there's a real
and for me, chocolate milk just tastes so much better than any other protein shake out there will ever taste. So
very true.
Sorry, Tess, I cut you off there.
Go on, Tess. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say that growing up, I didn't fully appreciate how important protein was. But not talking about the supplement side, but just generally post-training. And it was only really when I got to the under-16 England team that they explained a little bit about nutrition. And there's 20 grams of protein after sessions. And so when I go and speak to schools, it's one of the things that I tell them is, but the way you get that is literally just a glass of milk or yogurt after and a banana, and getting the carbohydrate in there as well. And even now we are encouraged to do a food-based approach rather than using supplements, because like you say about the informed sport and the 100% me performance, that's what they call it, 100% me. There's such a fear because you can get a 2 to 4 year ban if you get, and when we were told that at 16, everyone was like, holy moly, that means I'm 20 by the time I get to play hockey again, you know. And so if you can get it from chicken or yogurt, or I use pea protein now, because I just find it's just so much safer, batch tested, and that really helps me. So that's just what I want to say.
That's awesome. Another one that's kind of in vogue a little bit from like two perspectives: the tablet form, but everyone we've got a growing coffee culture in this country, haven't we? So everyone's getting on. I'm certainly drinking more coffee now. That might just be adulthood, I don't know, but certainly I'm drinking more coffee. So what's the thinking with like caffeine and performance, and particularly like young and developing players? And does that change when you get a bit older?
I again would say that that's definitely like an extra 1%. You know, kind of like when you're kind of further along the pathway. I would say sort of like club level, not necessarily something you need to be knocking back or taking caffeine tablets or chewing gum or anything like that. I honestly think like at that level, just really get your basics done, because there's so much to be said of just like fueling well, having like a good pre-game meal which you believe in and you think that makes you feel at your best and perform at your best, and like getting that all in place before looking at those extra 1%.
Okay, perfect. So we
I had
go for it.
So I had an interesting sort of experience of caffeine at the beginning. When I joined the program, everybody was taking caffeine pills before most people in the changing rooms before a game, and I was quite surprised because I didn't really understand caffeine. That was something that we would never talk about. And then I had a couple of instances where I did take caffeine tablets for like trialing them before matches and things like that. And I just felt quite shaky on the pitch. And my decision making was off. And then I realized I don't need to take caffeine because I want to be like completely present in the moment. And so I found for me, it's just kind of, it didn't really help, but I always have a coffee in the morning. So that helps me.
Do you develop a tolerance to it, Hattie? So if you regularly lose caffeine pre-performance, does that have like diminishing gains because you don't have the same stimulus to it anymore, the response to that?
So the research kind of says that even if you are like a habitual caffeine drinker, you can still get a response in terms if you were to take like a caffeine gum or a caffeine tablet. But if you are if you drink caffeine less, like normally through tea or coffee or whatever, it'll probably have more of an effect on you versus someone who just drinks it habitually, if that makes sense.
Got you.
Yeah.
I guess the last question I had, and this is a topic that we've covered from every angle with every guest we've had on, from a hockey, a psych, a mindset, this rubbish period we're in, what challenges are we facing you seeing in athletes from a nutrition standpoint around not being able to train in the way they normally would or at all, and being homebound? So how are you supporting athletes differently with this period?
So personally, what I've been doing from a work perspective at the moment is, I guess I'm really fortunate in terms of I can still do a lot of my one-to-one consultations like online. So I've been really fortunate in terms of like that hasn't changed too much. Continues doing lots of workshops, which is good. I guess one fun thing that we've done, or at least I found it fun, is more sort of like group cooking sessions, and sometimes we just use that as a social as well, because like, don't know about you guys, but my normal life I would probably go out and eat maybe 2 or 3 times a week, whereas like now I'm like, oh god, I have to think about what I'm going to eat for dinner like again. So I guess kind of like just doing more sort of like group sessions online, it's been like a nice fun social thing. We've been able to like just cook different meals and those sort of things just to like keep it interesting, really.
Perfect. We've actually got one in the diary with Sam next week on Monday. Doing a staff one, so that should be fun. I'm feeling that Brett's already getting quite competitive about it, so we'll see how it goes.
Sounds about right.
And then what challenges is it throwing up for the athletes that you're supporting, Hattie? What sort of things are they dealing with, and how are they dealing with them from a nutrition perspective?
I guess sort of just like lack of routine, really, more than anything. So kind of just trying to like shift their eating habits, especially if they've kind of gone from training multiple times a day to a lot less. So kind of just switching maybe like their normal like high carbohydrate meals to ones which are more protein based. So just adapting that really.
Yeah, I suppose a nice unintended consequence, there's not too many good ones of this period, but might be better cooking skills.
Yeah, definitely.
You get a bit more experimental in the kitchen, a few more ingredients, better knife skills.
Yeah.
Doing a bit more. Could be one of the few positives.
More 100%.
So next year's freshmen are going to come in. You need them more like an advanced class with them because they're all. I did that in lockdown. I know how to do an onion.
Yeah, I know. And we should see my cooking skills as well. So I think some of the athletes now are like taking over mine. I'm just a normal like spag bowl kind of girl. So.
Well, yeah, a lot of people have like just started Instagram cooking pages going up everywhere, aren't they? So it's become a very in vogue thing, and that probably will help an athlete population, I guess, this generation, I think, in the long run. So maybe there are some lifelong skills been learned, which is cool. I think I've asked enough, guys, and I know Hattie pretty well. So is there anything that you two want to find out and dig a bit deeper with?
Yeah, I'd love to. I have a list of questions, but I'd love to know about the little 1%ers you think that have been made over the last maybe like 5 years for athletes, and that are you things like, I don't know, beet juice or like creatine tablets and things like that. What role do they play now?
I do still think they do play a role depending on what level that athlete is at. So for example, when I work with the rowers, it is a situation where we do just throw the kitchen sink at them because they are looking for those very like marginal gains. So for example, with the creatine, it definitely still does play a role in sort of like strength gain as an example, but as long as you've kind of got those basics right as well, so in terms of like the amount that you're eating, amount of protein you're getting in through your diet. So yeah, I would say they definitely do still play a role. It's just got to be for the right type of athlete, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because my nutritionist with GB hockey said that there was this tablet called creatine which can help you do repeat high intensity effort more often, and I was like, hang on a second, why have I not heard of this before? Get me on this. But then so I wasn't sure if it's not going to be a miracle, supplement unless you've got everything else there. But like, have you ever, so what do the rowers, what are those marginal gains that they are looking for?
Do you mean from like a physical perspective, or?
Yeah, and like a nutritional, what they're like the 1% things?
Yeah, so I guess sort of like being able to just generate lots of power. So again, we use things like creatine. I guess also even from like a health perspective, so being able to like be available for all training sessions. So we'll put in like a load of like immunity stuff as well for them. So everything from like Vit D to help them with like bone health, but also we do a lot around stuff like gut health as well. So probiotics, Yakult, Actimel, that sort of thing. But yeah, it's very much like do everything we can, especially with this year COVID going on, but also obviously going to the Olympics as well. So yeah, we just try and exhaust everything really.
That's so cool. Yeah, when I broke my hand last year, 2 years ago or something, I don't know, 2 years ago, I was taking calcium tablets, and I literally just like shoving them down, like, grow back.
Yeah.
Like,
So
surely it's
true.
going directly into the bone.
Yeah.
And then my other kind of question is about people talk about consistency with nutrition, but can there be sort of like a 5-day, 2-day sort of plan where you sort of go really healthy for 5 days and then kind of give yourself a bit of a break on the weekend? Or do you see athletes as needing that consistency?
I think consistency is important, but I also really recognize that like athletes are human beings too. Like they're not robots. So being like, oh, you need to eat well 100% of the time, like 7 days a week, you know, it's just not always, it's not possible. Like nobody is like that. So, you know, throwing in treats or I don't know, like chocolate biscuits, that sort of thing, like that is completely fine. Like that's not going to make you a bad athlete or unsuccessful. So I do try and just kind of say everything in moderation. You know, to a degree, you still want to be able to like protect those important training sessions, making sure that you fuel well for them, recover well after. But yeah, you need treats in there as well, especially at the moment.
Has anybody seen The Rock's Instagram and his cheat days?
No.
Wow. It's there are cheat days, and then there is my entire calorie intake in 24 hours.
Oh, it's
mental.
on to 24-hour. I don't know if your average person could take on that amount of food and metabolize it. He did some crazy stuff, like the stacks of the pancakes with the bacon and maple syrup. Then he's having pastrami sandwiches and he's having pizza. It's like, what's going on there? It's just
Well, if you Google The Rock cheat day, Google it. It will blow your mind.
Don't necessarily try it at home, but it's certainly impressive.
Hatty, I had one more question.
Yeah.
For the younger students out there, younger athletes. So there's a classic when you want to become an athlete, you're thinking about your body type, but also your performance. And there's especially not just in young girls, but boys as well. There is this stigma around having, I don't know, excess body fat that you think is not going to make you an athlete. And fortunately, when I was growing up, I never really thought about it because I was just going to play hockey. But there are those pressures when you go to camps and you see other people, and because sport is a physical thing, you're exchanging looks and seeing appearances, and sometimes you can think I might be picked because I look really athletic, but I might not, you know, or I don't look athletic, sort of thing. So I was wondering if you had any advice for like I don't know, we can say it's a younger test potentially, that makes it easier. If she was, or like a younger Mike, if he was struggling with his relationship to food, what would your advice be?
I think that's like such a great question. And I think it's a problem that we probably are seeing more and more of as well. And I think especially because access to social media, influencers, models, those sort of things, like people are constantly comparing. My biggest bit of advice would just be to understand that everyone is so different. Everyone has very different body shapes. Just because someone looks a certain way and that works for them doesn't mean that it will work for you. And ultimately, the most important things are number one, like your health. There's no point in trying to get into a tiny size if you are constantly ill. Putting that pressure on yourself can also make you injured as well, which is again one of the last things that you want. And also, like, just from a mental health perspective, people are putting more pressure like on themselves to be a certain size, and it's just not necessary. Everyone is really individual. and like first and foremost, you should just be looking to kind of like fuel well, play well, and then recover well after. I think especially at the moment with COVID and going on, I am working with athletes who are kind of struggling more with that relationship with food. And I just really encourage people to sort of like reach out to a coach, to someone else on their team if they are struggling with a nutritionist. There's some really good like charities out there as well, which they can look into. So places like Beat, First Steps are also really good charities to have a look at too.
That's really, it's something that I think probably is starting to be talked about a little bit more now, but
yeah.
elite athletes are still very mindful or careful about what they say about their own sort of relationship with food. And I think that needs to be changed, especially because when you watch a sport, because it's such a visual thing, you feel like as an athlete you're being watched in that sort of way. But at the end of the day, if the ball goes in the back of the net, then everyone's going to be cheering, no matter if you personally think you should be a size smaller or something. So I just wanted to get it out there to everybody, or whoever needs to hear it, that your relationship to food is really important.
100%.
You see a lot, Hattie, people kind of in young athletes conflating body image and performance as like the same thing when they're entirely separate things.
I think lots of them are starting to put it under that same umbrella, like, oh, to be a successful athlete I need to look like X, which just isn't the case at all. And I completely agree with Tess that people need to talk about this sort of thing more. And it's almost been pushed into like, oh, it's now becoming like a cultural thing. Like, I don't know. So, for example, you know, if you have like low body composition, you might not have like a menstrual cycle and things like that. And people are like, oh, well, that's normal. It's like, but it's not. And like these issues definitely need to be spoken about more, because it is so important. And you know, it's not the health implications of trying to be like a more petite size. Like, it's not just in that moment. It's like it's lifelong problems that can catch up with you in like 10-15 years time, that sort of thing. And I think just like Tess said, like raising more awareness around that and just more education, really.
And I'll be completely honest, like I had not a very good relationship with food when I was 17, 18, 19. Really struggled with it quite a lot, actually. And it took me a couple of years to really come out the back end of it and actually feel like, and actually understand, because in my head I was like, I need to be lighter, faster, whatever. So actually, that was kind of but I didn't have the understanding, I didn't have the knowledge or the experience. So for now, I'm looking at going, I would have been twice the player if I'd actually just sorted my nutrition out and actually managed it better. And actually put on muscle and actually tried to, do it that way and actually, fuel properly and everything else. And I would have been far better player. But actually, it's one of those things you learn in hindsight.
And I think with that as well, Mike, like stereotypically, you always think that these sort of problems just affect like females, but it's absolutely not the case. Like low self-esteem or problems like body image can affect like absolutely everyone. So it definitely needs to be spoken about more.
100%. We've got 3 questions in here. And then if there's anything else from either Gibbo or Tess, then we'll go from there. So we've got Britt Brody, I'm a massive fan of. She's a coach in America. So she's put Gatorade spit out, and what's your opinion? So I don't know what that is. So I'm putting the question out.
I'm not sure. I don't know if that's like a carbohydrate mouth rinse.
I think it's
it's like Lucozade, but you
so I think some of the research does say that can work, and again, really good if you kind of get like stomach upset from like sports drinks and things like that, because it's not actually entering the system. It's more like a cognitive effect. good option, definitely.
I don't know if do they make a product that's specific to is meant to be spat out, like that's the idea of the end user, or do athletes just buy Gatorade, swill it, and spit it?
Which
do
is
you know what? That's actually a good question. I don't actually know if they do like
is there a product on the shelf like this is the spit stuff to drink? Like,
I feel like there should be, otherwise that's a massive waste of like a Lucozade Sport or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Brit put back, yes, that is exactly what, you know, the whole swirl and spit and actually the research behind that. So yeah,
not very COVID safe, is it?
No, not at the moment. No. I was thinking that.
And then I've got two questions from Wayne. So first one, I'm told that eating red meat before a game is a no-go as it's longer to digest. Is this correct? And if so, what else should be avoided? So just a quick kind of not great things to try and put in your body before training and games.
Yeah, so I think red meat does take longer to digest, so probably something you wouldn't want in your sort of like pre-game strategy. We tend to say try and stay away from anything which is high in fat, so like cheese, like heavy creams, those sort of things, just because it does take a longer time to digest, and you don't want any like stomach upset or anything when you're mid-game. So yeah, we just say kind of stick to your basic carbohydrates and a small source of protein.
Cool.
And would you say that red meat extends to the evening before a game as well? Is it like that slow to digest, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you could get away with it having it in your night before meal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you said what creams, cheese, heavy cream, cheese, and then
anything which is typically like high in fat, basically. Even things like avocado, like oily fish, those sort of things can cause like stomach upset as well.
Mm-hmm.
I love my avocado on a Saturday before so it's slightly different. Very Marlow of me, right? And the other one was don't apologize for asking questions. That's why we have these amazing experts and guests on with us. So questions are good. Right, vitamins. What advice do you give 16-year-olds? It's performance center, so yeah, as you're saying, exactly like the right demographic for the 101 academies and stuff. Like trains pretty much all the time.
Yeah.
What's the advice on vitamins?
So it's hard to give out like specific advice. I would say if you are having a balanced diet, you shouldn't necessarily be deficient in like vitamins. So for example, like vitamin C, for example, you're going to get that from most fruit and veg, to be fair, but typically like your citrus based fruits, so like oranges, kiwis, those sort of things. I guess vitamin D might be something you want to look in kind of like over the winter months, but I would really kind of recommend getting like a blood test for that, just to make sure like how much they would need to take from a vitamin D perspective. But yeah, it wouldn't necessarily be something you need to like supplement on top. You should be able to just get that through like a balanced diet.
And a multivitamin, like, is that worth anything, or is it just
I honestly think if they're getting in like plenty of fruit and veg, maybe some fruit juice as well, it wouldn't necessarily be something they would need to take.
Fine. And then last question, just got one more from Brit. Upcoming schedule is crazy. 3 games, 4 days, ×2. Wow, that is a lot going on.
Yeah.
Any tricks or advice? And I guess like this isn't just for Brit, but a lot of these young athletes will play hockey, football, rugby, tennis, netball, like athletics. Like they'll do so much. So just before we answer Brit's question, just I'm gonna make sure it's a balanced diet. Yes. So yeah, like kids do so much anyway. So I think yes, this will apply to Brit, but actually, if they're doing performance center, they may be really good at 3 or 4 sports plus life and growing and everything else. Like, any tricks or advice to dealing with those heavy times when it's a bit crazy?
Yeah, so I would say if you have like a double header weekend, as an example, just really be on it from a recovery perspective. So any sort of like games or training sessions which are in quick like succession, you just really need to make sure that you are hitting sort of, we call them like the 3 R's of recovery. So making sure that you're like replenishing your glycogen stores, so getting in plenty of carbohydrates. I would say, again, if you're training the next day or have a match, like just making sure that you go for a really good like helping of that. Making sure you're repairing the muscles, so plenty of protein. Tess mentioned it earlier, but like a minimum of 20 grams. So like, for example, that kind of looks like a pint of milk, or like 150 grams of yogurt, a chicken breast, a tin of tuna, and then make sure that you're really rehydrating as well. And I think even then, if you can kind of like incorporate a smoothie or something as part of your rehydration, you can be getting like extra carbs and protein in through that. Good question with the tart cherry juice, again, sort of like extra 1%. So I don't know sort of like what level of athlete it works with, but yeah,
college, so it'd be takes similar to us at Loughborough, top college, same sort of population.
Yeah, so I guess you could kind of put like a tart cherry juice in there as well. That sort of like helps with the anti-inflammatory. But again, sort of like extra 1%, and just make sure they're getting in the right carbs and protein before doing that.
Is there anywhere like where, and I guess this is my last question, where is a good place for people to get signposted for nutrition stuff? And I think it's one of those things where I think if you're passionate about it, you're in the know, then you kind of, you go along you're in a pretty good route. If you're not, and you're maybe come from a family that isn't sporty, whatever, and you're having to learn this for yourself, like, where's some really good places to get the information? Because I think there's a lot of myths and there's a lot of like garbage out there in terms of what you should and shouldn't do. Like, where, if you're talking to an 18-year-old just coming up to Loughborough, like, where would you signpost them for, like, to go and look, research, whatever?
So I think my kind of a go-to place would be the British Dietetic Association, so like BDA, and they have like a special sports nutrition section on that. They do like lots of like fact sheets, which kind of says like what to have before and what to have after, some examples and things like that. So that would be my go-to. There's also like the Nutrition Association website, which will have lots more information on too. So yeah, those would be my top go-to. So yeah,
amazing. And maybe if obviously we've tweeted about the show and everything else, so maybe Hattie, afterwards, if you could like just write it in there so then the guys can see that would be amazing. So then
absolutely,
that would be really helpful. Thank you so much. Yeah, and again, someone's just put here, the internet can lead you to sponsored sites which aren't always an unbiased opinion. People are trying to, make some dollar. So sometimes you get put down bad rabbit holes. So yeah, it's sometimes not the easiest thing in the world. Tess and Gibbo, anything else, or Gibby, as we said.
Yeah, that was good today. Thanks for that, Gibby. Glad that went out on air. So
payback for Tessinator.
That's not me. Blame Andy Bradshaw for that one. So my last question, the only thing I sketched down was, I guess, like, do we know everything about nutrition? It's just the case of applying it, or is there still stuff that's been researched, like on the cutting edge, that maybe there's a few things we don't know? And like, is there a next big sort of breakthrough or thing, or do we know everything and it's just about applying?
So I think there's always loads of new stuff coming up. So we know the basics, like we know about the macros and the micronutrients. They'll be looking at like the extra 1% in terms of like timings of food, serving sizes of food, those sort of things. There's loads of research coming out on sort of like female athlete health, which I think is so exciting. So a lot around sort of like energy availability, like menstrual cycles, bone health, those sort of things. So I think we know the basics, but we're always like, we're building on it. We're building on that, which is really exciting. So yeah, be interesting to see where nutrition goes over the next like 5 or 10 years, I think.
Awesome. That's all I had, Mike.
Tess, anything from you?
No, thank you so much.
No worries. Thanks for having me, guys.
Oh, it's been a real pleasure. So thank you so much. And yeah, as we said before, this will go out. This has obviously been out on YouTube and Facebook, and they'll be free to watch after that, and also be available on all your favorite podcasts. So anybody following afterwards, give us a like, give us a follow, and yeah, listen to it to your heart's content, because I think there's some real gold in this. And thank you so much for joining us on episode 10. Episode 10, guys. That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
But no, thank you all very much, guys, and yeah, cannot wait to see you all very, very soon. So yeah, next week, show 11, more to follow on that. So see you all very soon. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.